Good morning. I am at my friend Danny's place, setting up for an upload. All right, let me get set up. Alrighty then, howdy. Yeah, this has been an interesting morning. Don't need to get into it. So a couple of you have asked, Miles, where's your van? Well, good question. My van is currently sitting in New Florence, Missouri. And I am currently, as you may have noticed, not in New Florence, Missouri, but actually El Paso, Texas. So why is my van in New Florence, Missouri, and I'm in El Paso? That is a far more interesting story than you might imagine. That's because that's where it ended up after its purchase. Let's rewind the tape a little bit. 9 weeks ago, I was watching this video by this young lady, and she had bought a Ford Econoline 250, 350, I think, and had converted it into a living space. And I'm like, why didn't I think of that? Duh. I thought, if she can do that, I can do that, but I don't like Ford Econolines and I don't like the GMC Savannahs. It's just not my thing. And that's not to disparage anybody's choice of van. It's just not the space I want to live in. I go looking for something with a little bit more character, and I run across a Ford Transit Connect. Not a Ford Transit, but a Ford Transit Connect. And I'm like, that looks really cool. I like that. It's the right size. It's got the right specifications. And more importantly, the Ford Econolines and the GMC Savannahs are basically gas guzzlers, and I just don't want to drive gas guzzlers. It's just not on my list of things to do. You spend very little money converting a van into a living space, and then you spend all this money on gas. I'm like, that's crazy when you can buy a van that's fuel efficient. And I'm like, okay. So I go looking for a Ford Transit Connect that has 25 to 30 mph. Duh, do the math. That was my primary choice, or my primary thinking, what I was thinking about. So I start looking on Facebook Marketplace. I jump on Craigslist. You know, I'm looking around El Paso, and there isn't a Ford Transit Connect for miles. Me and all the way around El Paso. Just not happening. So I expand the search, 100 miles, 200 miles, 500 miles, and I got, there's a couple, but just nothing in my price range. I'm like, okay, so maybe I just got to, scale back my idea and actually go buy a Ford Econoline and live in a tube. Now, mind you, my end goal is to live in a tube, just not that tube. So I start just on a whim. I think, let's go look in Boston, because that's where I ultimately have to go after the van is converted. I have to go up to Boston, clean out my storage space, and bring all of my stuff from storage into the van. That's part of the reason that I wanted to get the van to begin with. But I knew that I wanted to live in a very tiny space, and I knew that I couldn't stay here in El Paso, and I had to yeah. So you get the story. So I basically start looking in Boston, and there's a whole bunch of them there, and they're in my price range. Yay! And then I start looking in New York, DC, Atlanta, Miami. They're all up and down the East Coast. I'm like, why not do this? So I start looking all over the place. 22 major markets. Start sending out messages, yada, yada, yada. A week or two goes by, and I bump into my friend Larry Treen. Larry and I, make an arrangement, and he basically becomes my car guru. Yay! Because I know dick about cars, and Larry knows lots about cars, not to mention woodworking, metallurgy, and a whole bunch of other stuff that I know dick about. So basically, Larry offers me his garage to go and experiment and put my van together. Ding! I start sending Larry all of my listings, and he starts knocking them off one by one. That one's got rust. This one has running boards, and the rust has gone all the way through the running boards. This one has a gas leak. This one has an oil leak. This one has a rebuilt title. You don't want any part of that, yada, yada, yada. So basically, I start getting an education the size of... I got one from Larry, and boy, did he ever fill me up left, right, and center. He talked to me about transmissions. He's talked to me about basically anything that could possibly go wrong with this vehicle. And then fast forward about 6 weeks, and we've gone back and forth with half a dozen people at this point of getting close to sales, not actually selling, and then people just like off into la la land. At this particular point in time, I'm in various stages of communications with about a dozen actual vehicles. Unfortunately, I didn't document some of them. I did document a few of them. From varying stages of, this van looks really, really great, really excited about it. Can you send me some more pictures? All the way up to, we've negotiated a price. We're thinking about how do we make this happen? So in 3 of those cases, one is in Chicago, one is in some city in Washington State, and another one is about 5 hours from Larry. This is a trucker that Larry had talked to on the phone 2 or 3 times, and we've negotiated a price. I've negotiated the other 2 prices. It's within my price range, yada, 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 and we're all set. So I'm looking at how best to fly from point A to point B. be so that I can hit all 3 locations, or at least hit 2 of them, and Larry hits the one that's about 5 hours from him. Bing, bang, boom. I'm almost ready to pull the trigger on the flight schedule, and Larry sends me this message, and with a link attached, and he says to me, "You want to look at this?" I'm like, "Okay, fine." So I look at it, and it's not. I'm like, okay, Larry must not have had his drugs this morning. Not the first picture, but the second picture is the back, and you can see it here. It's, crumpled, and it's rusty, and I'm like, what? So I text Larry back, and I'm like, are you on something? He says, just look at it, Miles. Think about it a little while. So I think about it, and then I move on to other things. Larry presses his case a little while later, and he says to me, listen, I'm going to contact this guy. And I'm like, Larry, I don't want the vehicle. And he says, just trust me on this one, Miles. I'm going to contact the guy, set it up, and let's at least get the ball rolling. Aside from the bumper, I look at it again. Aside from the bumper, it's actually really clean. Unfortunately, it's got high mileage. My first question is transmission. Larry addresses that instantaneously, has already contacted the guy, in the time that it took me to pull the stick out of my ass. Turns out they had a transmission swap at 175,000 miles. I'm like, great. So there you go. We agree on a price in like a half an hour, and they set up a time when Larry can go see the vehicle, and the vehicle is 2.5 hours from Larry in Bates, Missouri. Great. So they set up a time. Larry's gonna go out there Friday afternoon, ding, 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 and if all goes well, I might have a vehicle, come Friday afternoon. This is also, while I'm in the midst of 3 other negotiations, and all 3 of those other negotiations all went poof. And not because I had found another vehicle, but because those people had basically, ghosted and decided not to want to sell the vehicle, or just not communicate with me in any way, shape, or form. I'm flying out, yada, yada, yada. My itinerary, I'll be on the ground, and I'm not getting anything back from these people. So, I've already had these conversations with people. Here's an idea, Miles. Let's at least go have the conversation. I'll take my truck and the trailer. If it works out and you're comfortable with it, we'll buy the vehicle, and then we'll send folks a nice note. If they ask questions like what happened, and you will remind them that I heard nothing from you. So I needed to move on. And the next morning, Larry gets in his truck and he gets the trailer and drives off to Bates, Missouri. Drives in, gives me a buzz. We do the walk around. He does a test drive. Basically runs through my checklist of all the things that I needed to see in order to feel comfortable with buying a van. And a half an hour later, basically, we get down to the acronym. So what's the acronym? In every single one of these scenarios, when we've gotten close with a vehicle, I will come down and ask one simple question of Larry. And every time that I've asked this question, this acronym of Larry, he usually hems and haws. So the acronym is this, WWLD. And you're going to ask, well, what's that? WWLD is, what would Larry do? Every time that I've asked Larry this question, he's essentially hemmed and hawed or puckered or backtracked a little bit. Well, and he gives me that Midwestern twang, and I know at that point he's bullshitting me. Well, Miles, it's your vehicle, and gets all foghorn leghorn on me. Well, Miles, if it was your vehicle, he starts drawling more with that voice, and I'm like, okay, that's not happening. It's your money, Miles. It's your life, and that means that Larry would not buy this even if you paid him. This time I asked him WWLD, and I said to him, Larry, you know the question I'm going to ask you. He says, yeah, I know. He's prepared for it. I said, well, WWLD, and Larry says, buy it. Really? And there was no hesitation in him. Buy it. And I knew right then and there that Larry wasn't bullshitting me in any way, shape, or form, and he meant it. He meant buy the damn thing. So half an hour later, bing, bang, boom, I am now the proud owner of, say it with me, a Ford Transit Connect 2011. Larry sticks it on the flatbed and drives away to his home in, say it with me, New Florence, Missouri. That's how the van got to New Florence, Missouri, and I'm still in El Paso, Texas. And that is the sort of the partial story. There's a longer story to this. It's a much longer story to this. But that's the partial story of why the vehicle is in New Florence, Missouri, and I'm in El Paso. That's not the whole reason why I'm in El Paso, but it's the reason why the van is why I don't have my van right now. Okay, because now I have to go from here, from El Paso to Bangs, which is where Larry is. I know he's in No. Okay, Larry has a place in Bangs, Texas, and I'm going to meet him there, and then we're going to drive from Bangs to New Florence, and then we'll do the cleanup, and then the build, yada yada yada. Okay, yeah, the build is going to happen in about 3, maybe 4 weeks, if all goes well. And if all does not go well, then we won't do the build. All right, but all is going well. Anyways, if you'd like to support the channel, if you'd like to help out, then click the support option that works best for you down below. Likes, subs, gifts, cash, it's all good, baby! Having said that, thank you very much for watching. I appreciate your time and your patience and your patronage, and I look forward to seeing you somewhere on the road. Bye!